Today I'm going to give you my DraftKings NHL picks for Tuesday, November 8th. We're also going to dive into my favorite DraftKings tiers options, along with 3 of my favorite player prop bets of the night. Lots to get to, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Joe Holka here. Welcome to another daily fantasy sports and betting video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DraftKings player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel, clicking that notification bell as well so you don't miss anything along the way. If you want to take that a step further, check out the description below. All the live streams going forward are going to be over on Twitch. Definitely think about joining the Discord community as well, guys. Get involved. You won't regret it. All right, lots to talk about today. Let's not push it off any further. Really nice 9-game slate. Not a ton of news and notes, to be completely honest. It looks like Brock Boeser still is unavailable for the Vancouver Canucks, but that's not too much of a surprise. Would keep an eye on Eric Staal. He has an illness, so he's a game time decision on Thursday for the Wild. And then another game time decision, the Arizona Coyotes, Alex Goligoski. Looks like he has a lower body injury as well. Another game time decision. So definitely keep an eye on the news. Not some massive players, but definitely some that could impact the slate, especially if we get some value in some of those slots. So let's talk a little bit about the slate as a whole. We're always trying to target situations where we get teams in a good spot to accrue a lot of shots against defenses that give up a lot of shot attempts. So we're always trying to target these games where there's going to be a higher pace. And one of the things I like to do is this team rating page over at Fantasy Labs. So first thing I'm going to do is sort by Corsi 4 expectation. And as you guys can see, Vegas is the top Corsi expectation of the entire night. It's a really good spot, obviously, against the Ottawa Senators. If we just look over the past month, Ottawa has allowed the most Corsi by far on the slate over the past month. If we just sort by goals against, they've also allowed the most goals. So pretty much a smash spot for Vegas today. If we just kind of look at our goal expectation, they're tied with Tampa Bay. Another great spot for Tampa Bay, guys. I know we were on them earlier in the week. If we just look at the Corsi against, second best matchup as far as Corsi with the Islanders. So on the surface, guys, before we get into the Vegas lines and such, looks to be a really good spot for Tampa Bay at home and then the Vegas Golden Knights on the road in Ottawa. I really like both of those situations. The one that stands out to me outside of those two is Boston at home against Vancouver. I mentioned that Vancouver is going to be without Brock Boeser, but this game sets up really well for shots, as you can see. And Vancouver has allowed the 6th most Corsi over the past month, so pretty good matchup there. If we just look at offensively, Boston outside the top tier, so that's not the best. But the one thing that really stands out to me for this matchup is that Vancouver has actually allowed the 2nd most power play opportunities this year, which sets up really well for this Boston power play as far as Bergeron and Marchand, but they're the 5th highest power play team in the league as far as their conversion rate. So they're going at a 29.5% clip right now, which is pretty nice. The only teams ahead of them, Washington, Winnipeg, and San Jose, and Toronto right there as well. So the 5th highest power play, and it's against a team where they're probably going to see a decent amount of power play attempts at home. Really like Boston for sure. I think Florida is also interesting against this Edmonton team. Talking about kind of the special teams matchups, Edmonton has been just brutal on the penalty kill this year. 5th worst penalty kill in the league at 73.5%. So definitely think it could be a decent spot for Florida. That was one of the teams we were targeting quite a bit in the season just because of how much that team shoots, and we had some nice prices on those guys for a while too. So we'll have to check on some pricing there. As far as other teams that shoot a lot, Vegas, number 3, mentioned how much I like Vegas and Tampa. Coyotes and Chicago, definitely a decent team as far as shot attempts, but I'm not really on Chicago today. This Carolina team has been just elite at defending shots against. So I kind of like the other side of that game a decent amount. If we just look again at Corsi against, kind of past this past here, it looks like it could be a decent spot for Carolina against the Chicago team that's given up a ton of Corsi over the past month. So as far as some other tougher matchups, Philly gets this Arizona team. I wouldn't sleep on the Coyotes, guys. I've talked about them a decent amount just because of how much they were shooting early in the season, not really scoring goals. As you guys can see, that's really come back to kind of its mean. Like, so we were looking at this page about 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month ago, and the Coyotes were averaging like 1.5 to 2 goals a game, which was just insane because they were one of the highest Corsi 4 teams in the entire league, still top 5 at least on today's slate. So it wasn't surprising to see them start scoring some goals Defensively, they've been really good. So I actually think this Coyotes team is super underrated. But they have been giving up shots lately, but not a ton of goals. So not really on the Philly side of things. So we'll have to see kind of how things shake out over on the Vegas dashboard. But on the surface, looks to be a couple really good spots to attack tonight. I didn't touch on San Jose on the road against Dallas. Kind of got burned by these guys earlier in the week, but it might be a decent opportunity to go back to them, especially if they're on the road and they have a smaller team total than normal. Obviously, there's a ton of guys on San Jose that we can confidently attack for shots. So let's look over at the Vegas page, see if we can kind of see if we uncovered anything as far as the lines. All right, so unsurprisingly, Tampa Bay at the top. They are at home against this New York Islanders team, as we talked about. Really good spot for these guys from a shot perspective. They are the largest favorite of the night, only to Boston. So Boston's a team that I'm really interested in. I talked about how it's a really good matchup for special teams on the Boston side of things. That's going to be one of the teams that I'm really trying to prioritize in my stacks today. Interesting to see Florida as well. Talked about Edmonton, another team that is very poor on the penalty kill. So definitely think that that's nice to see them towards the top of the implied totals. And in tournaments, guys, like one of the best things to do in DraftKings hockey is to target some of these teams that are just outside this top tier. So a lot of the ownership is probably going to skew towards Tampa Bay, towards Boston. I actually really like Vegas. I talked about how it's a really good shot opportunity against this Ottawa team that gives up a lot, but they are on the road, so I figured that their implied total would be a little bit lower. As you can see, it's all home teams above them, but a really good spot for Vegas. So I think that they're a really strong tournament option today, as well as the Carolina Hurricanes against the Chicago Blackhawks. Just lost their coach. Really interesting situation there. Not a ton outside of that really stands out to me. I kind of am dialed in on a few specific teams, which is great. Thursday is a great tournament day. So we have 9 games, as I said. So let's jump into a little bit more specifics, and let's start kind of with the center position. All right, starting at center, one of the things that you guys will hear me talk about a lot, this is your first video, one of the things I'm really targeting at the center position in particular is Corsi 4 over the past month. So Jordan Staal at 5K, he is in the 97th percentile in Corsi over the past month. As you can see, it hasn't really turned into fantasy points yet, but if we just look at the game logs, he's logging a ton of shots, guys. So I think that he's clearly underpriced in this matchup against Chicago, who will give up a lot. 5K looks like a really strong value for Jordan Staal. Connor McDavid, another guy that's always popping in Corsi, if that gives you any indication, at 97th percentile there. So on the same team, actually, Sebastian Aho, 6,700. Not the best price in the world, but again, a lot of shot volume from this guy. Not really on him at that price, but in tournaments, if you want to pivot off of Jordan Staal, definitely think that makes a decent amount of sense. I don't love center today, to be completely honest. It's not a position that kind of stands out to me. So what I'm probably going to do is just pay up for Patrice Bergeron, just because I mentioned how much I love this Vancouver spot. Bergeron, always someone that's going to give us those peripheral stats, shots and block shots. 99th percentile in shots plus blocks over the past month. Even at the long-term stuff, 99th percentile over the past year, guys. So I really like to look at some of the shorter-term stuff, like over the past month or even 15 days for context, but can't do much worse than much better than Bergeron today. 7,600. He's a guy that I'm probably going to pay up for at center if I'm going that direction. As far as some of the other guys that are available, I definitely think that Steven Stamkos, we can go back to him. We've talked about him a lot. We talked about him in tiers a couple nights ago. He did score in that game. So 7,200, it's him and Bergeron. If you're going to pay up for both, I definitely think there's enough value to do so. But look at the shot volume, guys. And what I really like about Stamkos is probably what goes understated, honestly, in the community. It's how active he is on the power play. We know about that one-timer, but the volume of these shots, and we know how much more valuable power play shots are. So 96 percentile in power play shots over the past month. So really like to stack up this Tampa Bay team in general for just looking at the power play. As you can see, Steven Stamkos is averaging a shot on the power play per game. Only Kucherov actually has more power play shots over the past month. So definitely think that they're trying to funnel their offense through those two guys. And you can still go to Ryan McDonagh, guys, at 5,900. I know we're talking about the center position, but Ryan McDonagh definitely stands out as a guy that's clearly underpriced. 5,900 for a guy in the 94th percentile in shots plus blocks over the past month. This massive team total for Tampa Bay and a great matchup at home against the Islanders. So one of my favorite stacks tonight is just starting with McDonough, Kucherov, and Stamkos, and then seeing what we can work as far as value from there. So as far as the other centers, I think there's definitely an argument for the San Jose guys. Logan Couture, another one that's popping as far as the Corsi, but really kind of zoned into paying all the way up or paying down at the position. So if we're just looking kind of at the value spot, there is one guy that I think is somewhat interesting. So looking at Joe Thornton, he's not a guy that I normally play just because his shot volume is relatively low compared to some of these other guys, but 3,700, it just seems like a really good spot to get on him. It's not a great matchup, obviously, against Dallas, but he's someone that's coming back from injury at 3,700. I think he's worth a shot in tournaments. He is in the 98th percentile in Corsi since he did come back from injury. So might end up being a little bit thin. If we just want to go a little bit safer, you can probably go to a couple other options at some of the other positions, but not necessarily center. So let's look at wingers now. So just looking at these from kind of a broad perspective, one of the guys that I'm always kind of interested in is Alex Tuch for the Vegas Golden Knights. I mentioned how he's just been on a tear lately, 5,600, way too cheap for this guy. Basically, his shot volume in the last game, we kind of caught the lower end, obviously, but 99th percentile in shots plus blocks over the past month, and on the power play, 98th percentile. So you're basically getting similar peripheral stats from Alex Tuch as you're getting from David Pastrnak. And Pastrnak all the way at 7,500. Certainly think that he's one of the best pay up options, but I think I prefer to pay up for Bergeron. If I'm not totally stacking, kind of would rather go down to Tuch, I think, and get a little bit of saving. So if we go, let's go back to that Golden Knights team though, just because I did talk about them a little bit earlier. Jonathan Marchessault has our highest shot expectation of the entire night, which is not surprising. Almost every slate he's in, he has the highest shot projection just because 99th percentile in shots, guys. He's one of these guys that we can always count on for volume at 7,100. It's tough on this slate to really get there with some of those center options, but if you're stacking up Vegas, love the idea of getting Tuch, Marchessault, and maybe paying down for a guy like Shea Theodore. Theodore at 5K still seems like a relatively decent value. I think that there's some better options for peripherals. But yeah, Pacioretty at the winger position still seems like a guy that could be on the verge of a breakout at 4,400. Decent value option, I think, just because of the correlation on this first power play unit. Again, he's just kind of coming back, right? He's kind of feeling things out, but this is a guy we've relied on in the past, hasn't really come to fruition yet for the Golden Knights. But if you're stacking up this team, you can do it for a relatively cheap price. So I really like Vegas tonight in general, specifically in stacks. So at the defense position, I already talked about Ryan McDonough. He's probably my favorite defense option on the slate yet again. But let's talk about San Jose. I feel like we always have to talk about these guys just because of their volume in general from shots and block shots. We're always thinking about Karlsson versus Burns. Their prices are to a point where I still think that they're a really good option, especially Brent Burns at 6,800, 79th percentile in Corsi, 94th in shots plus blocks, another guy that's been active on the power play. So Brent Burns, we're always going to have that time on ice, right? He's just going to eat minutes. He's always going to be one of those guys that gives us a chance for 4 to 5 peripheral stats. So I definitely like him in cash games, and Karlsson definitely has some upside as well. So if we're just kind of looking for one of those guys that can give us a little bit more upside, certainly think that he is in play. As far as some of the other plays for GPPs at the defense position, one guy that I really like is Keith Yandle for the Florida Panthers. So I've talked about Yandle a good amount, 96th percentile in shots, 6,300. It's still a pretty good price for this guy. He's got a lot of offensive ability and upside, so I think that you can go back to Yandle, especially in this matchup against the Edmonton Oilers. It sets up really well for the skill position players, especially those on the power play. So as far as the value, I really don't love a lot of plays today. So one that I am looking at is Sergachev over on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So at 4K, he definitely seems a little bit underpriced to me. 84th percentile in shots plus blocks. If we just go over to the power play units, we'll notice that he is on the second unit. So if you're kind of fading some of these more expensive options in Tampa Bay and maybe stacking up some of these peripheral options for Tampa, Sergachev could definitely be a guy that you go to for savings. I think that he's in a pretty good spot. After that, it gets pretty gross fast at the defense position. One guy that I am looking at on Vegas is Colin Miller, if I didn't mention him before. Kind of same kind of thing. If you're fading some of these Golden Knights players, I definitely think you can go to Colin Miller on the second unit, 93rd percentile in Corsi, 84th in shots plus blocks, and a guy that's been seeing good amount of usage on the power play as far as his shots. He has more power play shots than anyone on this team, or sorry, this second unit, besides Hunt as well. So Hunt at 4,700 was the other guy I was going to mention. So I think that when you're going at value today, this slate really shapes up for some of these like secondary options in Vegas and Tampa Bay. So that's pretty much what I'm on today. At the goalie position, I think Yaroslav Halak is my guy for Boston. He is 8,200, so he's pretty expensive. He's much better value over on FanDuel, but I think as the highest favorite of the entire night, definitely love putting him in my Boston stacks. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, I kind of like Roberto Luongo. He's only 7,300 against this Edmonton team. It's always scary to kind of play a goaltender against Connor McDavid, but definitely think that he's a decent play. If we're just kind of looking for shot volume, if you believe in the Chicago team, which I'm not sure I'm on, they're definitely going to get a lot of shots from Carolina today. So they are a slight favorite in that game as well, which I think is somewhat interesting. Another guy you can probably go to is Carey Price at 7,900. Decent sized favorite for Montreal, and he does have one of the highest save predictions on the slate against this Buffalo team. Montreal has been giving up a decent amount of shots. So that's kind of where I'm at goaltender. If I can, I'm getting up to Halak. If not, probably paying down for Luongo. If you're playing tiers today, I think it's pretty easy in tier 1 to fade Patrick Kane against Carolina. This team's been elite against shots, so I'm not really on Kane. Maybe in tournaments I can see an argument. Same kind of thing with McDavid. I think he's a better tournament play. So it comes down to Brent Burns versus Pasternak for me. If you are going to play Bergeron in one of these other tiers, definitely think you can go to Pasta, but the cash game play I still think is Brent Burns. You can always start and feel pretty good about your teams as far as what their floor is going to be with Brent Burns. So tier 1 seems pretty straightforward to me. And tier 2, I'm basically in between two guys. I'm between Bergeron and Kucherov. So I prefer Bergeron. Kucherov certainly makes a ton of sense in tournaments, especially if you're stacking them with Steven Stamkos. I'm not really interested in Jack Eichel against Montreal. Pettersson. I'm not really interested in a center that's going to be in Boston and probably have to match up against Bergeron for most of the game. So definitely think that this tier is probably going to be Bergeron in cash games, Kucherov in tournaments for me. Or you can kind of flip that if you end up playing Pasta in tier 1, correlating with Bergeron. Certainly makes a lot of sense. In tier 3, this is kind of a gross tier for me, guys. I feel like you can always kind of side with Sagan and his floor. This is one of the first times I've seen him in tier 3, 99th percentile in shots, 99th in shots plus blocks. So maybe it gets to the point where you guys don't care so much about matchup and kind of just go with what you think is going to be a decent floor option. And Sagan certainly fits that bill in any matchup. Tier 4, this one's pretty easy for me. It's going to be the same kind of thing as tier 2, Marchessault or Stamkos for me. It's going to depend on which side I'm stacking for sure. And then I think the tournament pivot in tier 4 is definitely Keith Yandel for a lot of the power play reasons that I mentioned earlier. Tier 5, Ryan McDonagh. I mean, I just think that he has such a great floor tonight just because of the team total for sure, but also his shots and his block shots, pretty standard. That'll be going to him in cash games. Tier 6, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, still underpriced relative to his role with Connor McDavid. Definitely think he makes a ton of sense in this tier. This is one of these tiers that I don't think has a ton of great options, but I do think the best option is still Alex Tuch. He's a guy that I was prioritizing earlier in the week, even in a higher tier. So I think that it's between Tuch and probably Nugent-Hopkins for me, but Tuch with that team total and that fantastic matchup, I think gets the edge for me. Tier 7, getting Brad Marchand, especially if you're correlating the Boston guys in this tier, seems like kind of a steal in tournaments. So I think that he's probably the guy that makes the most sense to me. Outside of that, there's really not like a massive like peripheral stat guy here. Like you can make an argument for Thomas Tatar. He's been someone that has been pretty decent as far as his shot volume, 92nd percentile in shots over the past month, 97th in Corsi. So I think that he's somewhat in play. Another guy, Vincent Trocheck, probably just goes a little bit undervalued just because he plays for Florida, but a pretty elite peripheral stat guy, 96th percentile in power play shots. Mentioned, so Yandel, if you end up playing Yandel, you could end up playing Trocheck as well for that power play for Florida that I do think is in a really good spot. As far as them being on the first unit together, you definitely gain a little bit of correlation there as well. All right, last tier, I think it's Dougie Hamilton, guys. I think we just take the value here. He's 99th percentile in shots, 99th in shots plus blocks. The other guy that I do like in this tier is Evander Kane. Always like Evander Kane just because of the volume that he has. Just not a great matchup for San Jose today, so I'm not kind of on that as far as the top play, but I think he's the pivot, Hamilton, for me in tier 8. All right, taking a look at some props now. When you're over on Bovada, that's where you'll find all of the NHL props. You just want to go down to the team that you're targeting. And the first one that I want to talk about is going short on Darling, the goaltender for Carolina. Going short on the goalie in Carolina always seems to make sense just because of how little shots they give up. So if we search for Darling here, so his line is at 26.5 saves. Still think that the under is really safe here. I have my projection at 22.4 saves tonight, so definitely think that going under with Darling, you're getting decent amount of value on an under there. At 26 saves is pretty low line, but I think that he makes a decent amount of sense. On the other side of things, if there's an over to target for goalie today, I definitely think it's Craig Anderson against the Golden Knights. So if we find Ottawa here, sort by Craig Anderson, and so his saves line is set at 32.5. This Ottawa team, like we've talked about a bunch, is giving up so many shots that I still think the over is relatively safe for Craig Anderson today, even at minus 120. Those are the two goalie props I'm on. Last prop I want to tell you guys about is Patrick Kane. Mentioned how much care. I mean, for the same reasons that that I'm going short on Darling, I definitely want to be short on Blackhawks players hitting their normal shot floors. So as far as Kane today, he's looking at 4.5 shots. That line pretty aggressive, to be honest. So I think that going under on that makes a lot of sense. Minus 115. Have his projection at 2.9 shots today. So I think that I will be under on Patrick Kane for sure, especially at 4.5. He is a high volume shooter, so there's definitely some risk there, but I think this is a decent opportunity to just kind of skew towards the matchup in favor of fading Kane a little bit on the player props. All right, guys, going to go ahead and end it there for today. If you like my work and you want to support my work, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell, and go ahead and check us out over on Twitch. There's going to be a live stream tonight for Thursday Night Football if you're into some NFL action. The Twitch stuff's been great. We're also have a great community going already over on Discord. So come in, interact, ask some questions. It's been great. Having a blast with the Discord so far. So if you haven't checked that out, you're doing yourself a disservice. So both links in the description below to Twitch and Discord, and hope to talk to you guys soon. And that's going to just about do it for today. Definitely let me know in the comments what you guys think about the format. If you want to see more player props, less player props, if you would prefer I stick to just classic. Really trying to just get some feedback from you guys too. So these videos have been a little bit longer than I want, so I'd like to kind of cut them down a little bit and really target some of the things that you guys want to see. So check it out in the description below, the links that I talked about, but also in the comments let me know some feedback on today's video. All right, good talk. See you guys out there.